remind members and those in the public gallery to switch off mobile phones to silent and turn off 3G, 4G connections. Also advise the public gallery they're welcome to use devices on Wi-Fi, and I think we have details of Wi-Fi available there. Agenda item 2 then is apologies. No apologies have been received. Members aware of any other apologies? No? Yep, okay. Chairperson is coming later on, Clerk. Yep, that's great. Okay then, agenda item 3, draft minutes. Yep. Sorry, are the committee content to consider chairperson's business later in the agenda?
Yeah.
Agreed. Agenda item 3, draft minutes of the meeting of the 30th of November 2016 are available on page 106. With members' agreement, minutes are complete and accurate record of proceedings and no corrections needed. Members content to agree. Thanks. Okay, agenda item 4, matters arising. There are no matters arising. If people are content, we'll move to next agenda item 5. Our committee motion on the Education and Training Inspectorate 2014-16 report. There's a briefing note from the clerk on page 116. Clerk, do you want to speak to that proposal?
Chair, just a quick one for members on this. Members had agreed to put down to have a take-note debate. There's actually no such thing as a take-note debate in the Assembly. Incredibly enough, what we have is we just put down a committee motion. So that basically means that anybody could amend the motion. So the motion would simply be that this Assembly takes note of the Education and Training Inspector's Chief Inspector's report. But anyone could amend it. There would actually be a vote on it. I understand the Minister's happy to respond, and he's happy for the debate to happen any time in January. So I've confirmed, I think, with the Chair and Deputy Chair, they're both free every plenary day, and they'll be in the building every plenary day in January. So we will then leave it to the good offices of the Business Office to book us a nice time, not midnight, to have this debate.
Members content? Yep, okay.
And I formally agree.
Formally agree. The very concise motion. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Clerk, is it worth considering, I don't know whether this is the agenda item or not, but obviously we had the TIMS and PISA reports recently. Are those reports of adequate significance that they would be the type of thing to have an Assembly debate around as well?
I'd be very surprised if members didn't mention it, and in any event, the Chief Inspector did refer to previous TIMS and
So
PIRLs
it could be referred to within
reports.
this motion debate then,
I would think so, and I will have a chat with my Business Office colleagues and make sure that is the case. But since the Chief Inspector refers to it in a report, I don't think we have a problem.
Okay.
So it's quite a lot of interesting stuff to talk about around that.
Okay, no problem. Agenda item 6 then is Department of Education oral evidence session on January monitoring round. I refer you to page 118 of your packs. The Department has declined to provide oral evidence to the committee in respect of the January monitoring round. The committee has written to the Department offering to forego any further evidence sessions relating to monitoring rounds on the understanding that other budget information and oral evidence is provided, but the Department has yet to reply. I would refer you to tabled items, which include a revised 2017 to 18 resource and 2017 to 21 capital budget scrutiny timetable and previous related committee correspondence. As no information was provided by the Department in respect of the relevant budgets, I would seek members' agreement to make a null response to the Committee for Finance. The Committee has sought a briefing from the Department on the budget on the 11th of January 2017, 2 days after the budget is laid in the Assembly, and the Committee can at that time agree its position or seek further oral evidence prior to the budget debate at the end of January 2017. There are no papers and no witnesses for the January monitoring round. Therefore, seek members' comments or agreement with that approach.
So, Chair, just to clarify, around the budget, the committee asked a lot of questions of the department, but for reasons which we won't go into, they have not responded. So the idea is, budget's going to be laid on the 9th of January. I've asked the department, please come along on the 11th of January and members can ask them all the questions that they can, and the idea will be to inform the committee position for, I think there will be a budget debate around the end of January, which is in the page 7 of your tabled items. You have now the revised timetable, so and that's, if members are happy enough to do that, we can.
There was a deadline for committee response to the Committee of Finance. When was that, Carl?
I think that's about now. So since we've had no response, my suggestion would be is that we just write back to them and say, look, we asked questions, didn't get any answers, but look, our plan is, when the budget's laid, we're going to ask all our questions, and we'll the committee will set out its position then.
So as a result of a lack of information from the Department of Education, we weren't in a position to respond to the Committee for Finance request for a response with regards to the budget?
Yes.
Okay.
Sure, I think maybe
Go
we
ahead.
should communicate that to the Department of Finance, that we're unable to actually respond to their request because we didn't get any information.
Yeah. It's
Because
obviously
they asked
not,
us for the information, but then
Yeah.
we can't get it. Seems a bit
it's not an ideal situation by any stretch. We ideally would have liked to have had the information to be able to offer a response.
Indeed.
Okay. There was some discussion at the time as to whether we should be highlighting any issues of concern with regards to the budget, or, I mean, is it better to do that than offer a null response?
I think Carla wants to come in.
Sorry, Carla, yep.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, in terms of other committees, I know obviously we're concerned about education, but I would assume other committees are in a similar position. And would it not be advisable that we as a committee would put forward suggestions anyhow based on what we have, what we've heard and what we think should be prioritised by the department? At the end of the day, it's the Minister's prerogative and the department's prerogative, but would it be something, rather than going back with a blank sheet saying we're not responding because we didn't get any information?
So would it be the case then that the committee would want to indicate to the Committee for Finance that members are concerned about school budgets, for example, and early years support?
Yeah, I think there are several strands of things that have been, threaded throughout our committee meetings, be it the early years budget, be it the school budgets, and also around, the whole national insurance contributions and all of that there. I also think, we have to make reference to the information that we heard from, the group that were on in relation to the VAT. Employers for Childcare.
Okay.
Those types of things that have kind of popped up throughout our committee time. So we're not going back, because we're all well versed in where the money is needed. But at the end of the day, it is the minister's discretion.
So are there particular suggestions, Chair? So we've got school budgets, and that would include the national insurance issue, the employers for childcare, and sort of the general early years early intervention provision around things like the early years fund, which the committee have talked about previously, early years pathway as it now is. So are there any more, Chair?
I think too also special educational needs. I think it would be remiss of us not to make some representation just about the need for additional resources around that.
And probably around numeracy and literacy, because we've been talking about the signature project quite a lot.
And underachievement.
Well, then there's the outdoor education centres.
Yep, youth services.
Teachers' pay, which I think is quite an issue for.
It's the whole gambit of education we're going to
Yeah,
Well, I have made a list there, and everything that you've just said is on that list.
it would have been helpful if they could have given us a small list with some of their priorities on it that we could debate, but that's maybe what the point we're
the
making.
difficulty is, members, that we're in the absence of any figures, we can't do what we're often asked to do, which is provide how you would approach it alternatively. So all we can say is, here's what we think are priority issues. I don't see how that's a particularly meaningful contribution, and it's as a result of not having adequate information to be able to do so. But I think it's we should
Vice
highlight
Chair,
the issues that we think are priorities.
I think it's more constructive than just writing back and saying do you know what, we haven't got the information, so we're not going to respond. You know,
I
I think
actually
as a
don't know whether
committee,
it is, because I'm sure that Minister can work out those are all
as a
priorities, to be
well,
honest.
look, as a committee, we're very aware of these issues that have been raised, and I think it would be remiss of us not to utilise this opportunity to raise them at that level.
Okay.
I suppose it's
Yeah.
the point,
One
Chair.
wee
is-
second, Catherine wanted to come in
Yep.
and bring in
Sorry,
Colin. Yep.
Colin.
No, you're okay.
No, it is really just to agree, because here's the reality. We aren't getting the budgets, we know that. So we're going to have to just accept that reality, and we're going to have to play out our scrutiny role when we get the budget, and that's grand. But the reality is that even if we did get the budget, where there were gaps, there are going to be the gaps, and we're going to raise those issues. So I think it's much better to note all of the issues that we have agreed on and we have raised, send that back. If the Minister already knows it, all good and well. If he doesn't, then at least we're still playing some sort of a role.
Yep.
I
Colin.
suppose, wanting to be constructive, I suppose it's what we're being asked here. We're being asked by the Department of Finance about what we feel the committee's
Ready for
response
finance,
is to
yeah.
the budgets. The bottom line is we didn't get the budget, so therefore we can't answer the question. So, I think we've got a very, very baseline practical question that we've been asked, and we're unable to do it. And maybe a way to meet would be to do both. To note, first of all, that we're unable to provide the response because we didn't get the information that the Department of Finance wanted us to get. However, this is what we've discussed in the past period and feel are the priorities, and maybe that brings both sides together.
I think so. I think, building on what Clark proposed initially and feedback from members, we write to the Finance Committee to say we feel we're unable to respond in detail in the absence of detailed information. However, here are some of the issues that have been raised with us as a committee and that we would wish to highlight as issues of concern and priority for the Minister. Are members content with that?
To the department.
Yeah. Okay.
Excellent.
Item 7 then, members, is our Education and Health Special Educational Needs Cooperation Oral Evidence Session. Members, papers beginning at page 123 and tabled items which include a paper from the Department of Education and correspondence relating to the Special Educational Needs Inspection in schools are available. Can I welcome, this is a hearty team of witnesses today, can I welcome Caroline Gillen, Director of Access, Inclusion and Wellbeing at the Department of Education, Ruth Bell, Assistant Senior Education Officer at the Education Authority, Kieran McShane, Health and Social Care Board, Dr Jerry Mackin, Health and Social Care Trust, Michelle Tennyson, Public Health Agency, and Geraldine Teague, Public Health Agency. Can I advise witnesses that the session will be recorded in Hansard and invite you to give a short presentation. I think it's up to 15 minutes in total, and then we'll be glad to ask questions. Thanks very much.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We'd like to thank you for the opportunity to brief the committee on how health and education work collaboratively in the area of special education provision. I was going to start by introducing my colleagues, but you've already done that. So firstly, we'll go in and we want to stress initially that health and education, both at the departmental level and the operational level, recognise that successful outcomes for children with SEN, particularly those with significant educational and health needs, depend on effective collaboration between both sectors. And while there is a significant history of engagement between the education and the health and social care sector in relation to supporting children with SEN, the new duties under the Children's Services Cooperation Act and the Special Educational Needs Act provide a new context for our work to support all children, including those with SEN, as will the new programme for government with its emphasis on partnership working to achieve the strategic outcomes. But apart from that, education legislation has for some time specifically provided a role for health and social services authorities in the operation of the SEN framework. For example, that includes drawing to the EA's attention those children under school age who are likely to have a SEN, where in providing medical and health advice as part of the actual statutory assessment process and an annual review, and also in participating in the education transition planning process. I just wanted to touch on two areas now. Firstly, the statutory assessment process, which we know is of particular interest to the committee, and it's obviously in the interest of all concerned that statutory assessments and statements are made as quickly as possible. and that any delays are minimised as far as possible. As part of the statutory assessment process, the EA must seek the advice of the health and social care sector, and the new SEND Act will impose a particular duty on the EA and health authorities to cooperate in the identification and assessment of children with SEN. And I think that all of the organisations represented here today recognise the need for children to be appropriately assessed and to receive the necessary supports within the statutory timeframe. And we're also aware that challenges do exist in making this happen, particularly in relation to the exchange of information and advice between health and education. So it's for that reason that we have taken steps to consider ways to improve that interface between health and education within the SEN framework. And I think the paper that we provided you, it refers to that work commenced in 2015 through a health education working group to identify steps that the EA and the trusts could take in order to reduce the time frame for the provision of health and social care advice in the process. And a few outputs from the work of that group have included the development of a proposed new trust common pathway for dealing with requests for medical advice, greater sharing of EA information to assist the trusts in their advice-giving role, and work to develop common documentation for medical advice, and also the use of electronic transfer of information. So quite practical proposals there to improve the system. This work is now being taken forward by the recently established Health Education Interfaces Project Board, and there's a notification, referral and statutory assessment project team that's underway now that will build on that work and further develop the work started by the group in 2015. And I know folks at the top of the table here have been participating in that work and will be happy to provide further detail. I think importantly that project board that's been set up does bring the right people to the table. There's representation from the EA, trusts, the Health and Social Care Board, Public Health Agency, and it's co-chaired by the two departments. And moving forward, the work of that project board and future project teams will focus on different aspects of the SEN framework with the intention of improving delivery of services to children. Turning secondly to the transition planning process that we mentioned earlier, this is another key area where health and education must work together to meet the needs of children with SEN. And the EA's transition service works in conjunction, amongst others, with trust professionals, health transition officers, in order to plan for the change when the young person with SEN moves from school to adult life. A transition plan is prepared for every child with a statement following the first annual review after their 14th birthday, and then is reviewed on a yearly basis. And in fact, the new SEND Act provides a strengthened focus on this area of transitions, as it imposes a duty on the EA and health authorities to cooperate in the preparation of transition plans. Work is ongoing to make improvements to the transition process. This has been taken forward on a cross-departmental basis, led by the Department for the Economy. Previously it was within DEL, and it's supported by DE, Department for Health, and Department for Communities. And in particular, there's an action plan around post-19 transitions for people with severe learning difficulties, which was a particular area of concern. And the work of transitions will also be picked up as part of the delivery of the PFG outcome on improving the quality of life for people with disabilities. And DE is a key delivery partner in the context of the action plan within that outcome. Before concluding, I just wanted to move away from the detail of those legislative and process structures, just to highlight that at an operational level, health and education professionals do work together on a daily basis to meet the needs of children with SEN. This would include meetings to discuss maybe multidisciplinary approach to addressing individual children's needs, or participating in the joint delivery of speech and language classes, or indeed providing training to schools so that they can meet the medication needs of particular children in their school, and indeed working to deliver the early intervention transformation programme. For example, where one element of that programme is that every funded preschool setting now has a named health visitor assigned to it. And my colleagues beside me will of course be best placed to elaborate on those practical examples and indeed provide others. So just in conclusion, just to say to members, health and education partners do recognise the importance of cooperation. There is a good deal to be positive about, we feel, but we also are very conscious that the system isn't perfect and that we must always seek to improve services where possible, and indeed we are doing that. We of course have to recognise the resource pressures within the health and social care system and indeed within the education system, and so it's particularly important to cooperate as effectively and efficiently as possible. But we do see collaboration between health and education continuing and increasing as we work to deliver the programme for government outcomes and of course to fulfil our duties under the Children's Services Cooperation Act. So the challenge for departments and our agencies is to enhance this collaborative working to ensure that services for children with SEN are seamless and complementary and support those children to achieve their full potential. That's all we really wanted to say at this stage, and we're very happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Caroline. So nobody's going to add, that's the presentation.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris, for chairing the first part of the meeting. Thank you. Can I say that increasingly, as MLAs, public representatives, we hear from parents about the absence of joined-up working between education and health. And I think in the last committee, the predecessor committee, the department in May of 2015 advised that it and the Education Authority was working with the relevant health bodies who are here today in order to improve special educational needs provision for school-aged children. So I have a couple of questions. First one would be, can the department advise of the progress that it has made since May 2015 in respect of improving coordination with health? And can the department set out the measures it uses or intends to use to measure improved cooperation between education and health in respect of SEN provision? And I suppose, how will parents know that SEN cooperation has improved?
Mm-hmm. Well, yes, absolutely. I mean, I think I referred in my opening remarks to that initial working group that we established in 2015, where we did recognise, both departments recognised the need for improvement and where there were challenges. I think we in discussing round the table, and that some of the members of the group are here today, we did agree that we needed to look at practical ways of improving the system. And as I mentioned, some of the outputs are around common pathways, sharing of information, and pro forma. That work is being taken forward, and what we hope to do, it's part of the project team that's established now, and on many of these new processes and procedures we hope to implement from April next year. But I think colleagues may be able to elaborate. There are a number of steps that we've already taken where we've identified improvements. Perhaps Geraldine or Ruth from the PHA or EA perspective be able to give examples.
Yeah, thank you. I suppose what Caroline had said initially, that there's a strong tradition between health and education in working together to meet the needs of children with an SEN, but also as a preventative measure. And we're very fortunate because we do have multidisciplinary support teams that have been in operation now for close to 9 years, who have supported a phenomenal amount of teacher and class assistants in upskilling around the speech and language needs of children, social emotional behaviour and sensory motor that is impacting on their access to curriculum. And really, when we looked at that information, we know it's a universal support. So those staff have actually supported not only in the education sector but also at undergraduate level, so that the teachers and assistant support have the upskilling to be able to meet the needs of children in a preventative mode. And the training that was delivered, 66% of that was actually within school staff itself. We've also developed close cooperation around the supporting the children in the classroom setting. We want to get away from that view that intervention has to be seen as withdrawal of the child and doing on to, and very much working in cooperation with our parents, who are main caregiver for our children. And we have delivered a phenomenal amount of class-based modelling support as part of that model. We've also been very fortunate. Early Intervention Transformation Programme has really driven forward that further enhancement of cooperation, and we've got a fantastic model at this stage around EITP1, which is getting ready for baby, toddler and getting ready to learn, where we're, as Caroline had indicated, that there's health visitors aligned to all preschool settings. So really giving that advice where there is needs of concern as a preventative measure for those children with SEN, but also to identify an onward refer for those that need timely assessment and intervention. We're very aware when we look at our stats, both within our family support hubs, but also when we listen to our education staff around the needs around children and social and emotional behaviour. And as part of that model, we're delivering screening, and at this stage we're doing a 20% rollout, with there'll be an offer to parents to screen children on the social emotional areas, and also providing support within the home that will be complemented in education. Again, education colleagues in that Getting Ready to Learn have offered a wide range of training models that our preschool settings can take up, but that has given that common message. Again, in the past, what we've found is parents are getting message in health prevention, health promotion, but they may have come from different language. So, again, the commonality in that EITP programme has really driven and assisted that.
Okay.
And if I may just also add, we're progressing more efficient ways of communicating across the sectors as well through the use of ICT, so that we can exchange information in a much more timely and efficient way.
And in terms of the monitoring, I mean, we're also going to pick up some of the improvements. We'd spoken to you previously, and we'll be back again to talk about the new SEND framework and the new code of practice that we're developing. And as part of the implementation of that, a lot of these improvements will be picked up in the guidance moving forward, and will be implemented as part of that, and training will be rolled out. In terms of the monitoring, well, I mean, as part of the role of the project board, that's obviously overseeing the projects that are ongoing, but that will also include an implementation role in terms of overseeing implementation. And moving forward, I mean, it'll be important for everybody as children's authorities in delivering their statutory duties under the new Cooperation Act, that the likelihood is those duties will feature as part of, the business planning and corporate planning moving forward for every children's authority. So part of that is, how do you prove that you're cooperating, and obviously the reporting back to the Assembly that will take place under that Act.
I think it may be also helpful to members that we have certain groups of children who have a number of issues around support, and particularly those will be children perhaps in the looked after children's system. And we recognise that the educational outcomes for those children are significantly worse than their peers. There's been a lot of work done over the last year between education and health around actually supporting those children, including the issues around additional support financially as well to schools to actually help those children actually achieve more in terms of the outcomes akin to their peers. That has been going on very quietly behind the scenes, but certainly within the programme for government and within the ministerial statement, that will be one of the areas that we'll see that there will be particular special educational needs that need to be addressed between health and education. And there has been a fairly good working relationship in that so far. So a lot of things don't be seen in the public eye, and I think that's going to be one of the things we need to do, is highlight some of the initiatives that have been happening. Geraldine talked about the multidisciplinary teams. I think that about the end of 2015, I think there was just short of 11,000 children seen in those settings, of which 1,700 were referred further into the services. So actually there was an intervention for a significant amount of children. Now the plus for health is their needs were addressed at a very early stage, and a significant portion did need to become part of our waiting lists. They were addressed at that point in time. And that's the sort of practical examples I think that our members maybe should be aware of, because I think those are happening on a day-to-day basis. In the area of safeguarding, for example, colleagues in terms of education have been very, very actively involved in the drafting of the policies, procedures for safeguarding through SBNI. There's a lot of work goes on underneath the radar, and I think that perhaps there's a broader issue around maybe perhaps the perception that children with special educational needs are only in the special school setting. There are a range of special educational needs that we need to address collaboratively.
I think certainly from our point of view, from a practicing paediatrician point of view, what this project has allowed us to do is to share good practice across the whole of Northern Ireland. Example, mainly why I got involved in this, was that we saw our problem of responding to children, giving medical advice for the special educational needs process, and found that because of increasing demands from all areas, our ability to provide that on a timely basis had really decreased considerably. And because of that, we then looked at what we do, and we actually made a new process for actually deciding how we do that. Because some of the children who come through the special educational need process don't really have any health needs, but they were waiting on a health report in order to get through the whole process. And we have changed our system to the point where actually being able to go through their medical records, speak to the parents on the phone, actually has decreased the number of people who need a face-to-face contact by over 30%. That then has allowed us to actually get timely reports in a much greater way. We went up from 52% of children getting a report within the 6-week time frame to 77% of children getting it, by changing our process, which has actually been really useful. Yeah. And that then, following consultation with the PHA, they actually arranged this. That's really one of the wings that sort of led into this group, because we actually ended up meeting up with all the paediatricians within all the trusts of the North, not all the ones who are involved in this process, and getting them to accept the process that we use in Enniskillen on a Northern Ireland-wide basis, which I think will be very, very helpful.
And does that mean that statements will be quicker, processed quicker?
Certainly, it has speeded up the medical element. There are delays in different. There's many different parts of the statementing process, and a response from a health is one part of that. And certainly, if we can speed that
traditionally, has that been the main cause of delay? I don't want to be too simplistic, but has that been the main cause of delay?
It's certainly one of them. Yeah. But it's certainly. Whether it's the main one probably is open to argument.
I think in relation to the review of SEN and the new processes, we are just looking to obviously reduce the time frame for statementing, and that has to be always our aim. Now, we don't, there may be circumstances where it's absolutely valid that assessment does take a little bit longer, because it's obviously really essential that there is appropriate identification assessment of needs. But as I said earlier, it's to make the system as efficient and effective as we possibly can be, and that is a focus for us moving forward.
Sure. Can I ask a very...
Sorry, just let Michelle in, if you don't mind, Chris, then we'll come on to you.
Just picking up on your point about, how will parents know that we are working together, and really that is absolutely critical. I think it's important to remind ourselves that we have a statutory responsibility to engage service users, carers and the wider public in our planning, our service delivery and any other elements of how we do our business. So certainly from our perspective, any of the work they're involved in, we will and must ensure that parents, the children themselves, are actually knitted into that process. We can't get into a situation where work happens and then suddenly we let the parents, etc., know what has happened. They will be front and central, and have been, to all of the work that we do. So I think that's important.
It's great to have the team here. I do appreciate very much the team that's here, and we all do. But this is a hot topic. So there's 7 members have indicated they want to question, and if I could maybe organise it in some way that each member has the right to ask a question, followed by 2 supplementaries. Wee bit of generosity there. And I'm going to go to... Already Catherine's looking 3.
No, I'm just saying. No, I'm saying 1 plus 2 equals 3. I've only got 2 questions, Charlie.
You're sensible, that's good. Okay, here's the order of the questions are going to come in. Chris, Colin, Carla,
I was
Rosemary.
just going to ask a supplementary. You can put me to the answer.
Catherine, Sandra and Morris, okay? Okay, we'll go to Colin first then.
Okay. Got to me. Thank you very much for coming along today. It's not very often the presenters nearly outnumber the members, but so we'll go easy in case it turns into a fist fight. But we had an engagement event in Stormont there recently, and I chose specifically to sit at the table with the parents. And there was 2 things that struck me: the frustration levels that they were vocalising, but also even in their non-verbal communication, they were desperately frustrated. And I know and accept that you've said some elements there about working with parents, but the feedback from them was that the system is difficult. They find it difficult to engage with it. They find that there's very little feedback. They find that they have to do a lot of the chasing of the information. They feel that it takes too long. And it was quite loud what they were saying. Now, what I wanted to ask was, would you consider doing some sort of review specifically with parents in a way to try and improve the service for them, as well as obviously increasing your outcomes, but, to be able to work with parents, to be able to try and help them with what they're doing? And also, have you any comment on the budgets for schools? Because I know that in my area, I have primary schools where the principal is having to make a decision about which child he will actually refer on, because he doesn't have a budget to send all the children that are on his list, and that there has to be some form of decision, a hierarchy of needs within a school, but that means that obviously only some are getting and not all are getting. And how do you work around that to be able to make sure that everybody that has a need gets it responded to? And I'll leave it at those questions.
Okay.
That one question.
Yeah. That's good. Very, very creative.
I think there was maybe. Just if I can start from the departmental perspective, and certainly the implementation of the new framework moving forward. And thank you for sharing the draft report with us. And certainly that did come through in terms of the parents' frustration and understanding about the system. And in our engagement events that we have had over the past number of years engaging with parents, certainly we have seen, and as we even engage with members of the Assembly, there is perhaps a lack of information or accessible information for parents in terms of understanding the system, understanding how it works and what their role and rights are under the system. And one of the things that we are working on for rollout alongside the new framework is actually a parent's guide. So we see that as being really critical, because that is the very starting point for people to understand how the system works. And aligned to that is an enhanced advice and information service, and also a dispute and resolution service independent that the EA will provide. And I think those are the starting points so that you have a proper understanding of the system. My colleagues in the EA and PHA will probably be able to add in terms of engagement with parents. Ruth, do you want to?
Yes, just as services across the authority, now that we're a single authority, it provides the opportunity for us to have to engage effectively with parents and indeed with children and young people, because we want to hear their views. And as we align SEND services across the region, it's important as well that we take those views on board, and we have progressed in a number of areas. Interim regional managers to take forward a number of those SEN areas of work. But it's important, just Colin, to come back to one of your points, it's important to note that many of the SEN services do provide universal opportunities for advice and support and capacity building, and that includes telephone advice and support to parents. But again, it's an area around communication, where in terms of, yes, it's important for us to have a parental guide around making their way through the SEN statutory process, because we acknowledge that can be a very anxious time for parents, and it's a statutory service, so there's a lot to understand. But we also want to give with greater information online, and using technology as well, and using the forum that parents and others are very familiar with at the moment to make public the universal services and how those services are accessed, how children can be referred, and we acknowledge that as well as making that information available to parents. That information is also going to be really important in terms of our schools principals and our SENCOs as well, so that everybody knows how to access what, and the single authority will facilitate that, and we will hope over time to have that online as well as using other forum for that.
Chair, also one of the things that's important, you asked how parents will notice the difference. I think one of the other issues is how the children notice the difference. Certainly within our world, we actually commission service through one of the voluntaries for young people with disability, because there is a clear distinction between special educational needs and disability. A lot of children with disability may have special education needs, some won't. Some with SEN will have a disability, some may not. But certainly within our world, we actually commission a service through the volunteers to have the voice of young people with disability actually inform some of the outworkings of what we actually deliver or what we commission. And actually, in terms of good performance management, they tell us what their experiences are. And if their experiences are not good, well then we need to look at that. But we do have a process in health for actually seeking the child's voice, and I think that's an important part of that there. And maybe there is some of that learning that we can share across the way, or even to allow that project to talk to colleagues in education about what the kids' experiences from that setting have been. But clearly they'll tell us about what has happened to them, and I think that's a voice that is very important in all of this, and we shouldn't be forgotten.
And I think as well, just there's the frustration, we do have to listen to our parents, and you're right about children. We do have that statutory responsibility under PPI legislation, and we are monitored very closely at every service design in delivery that our service users are actively involved. And any initiative that we've developed, we have included our service users part of that, including acute care with 10,000 voices, so using the technology to get the voice of the public to improve our services. Touching just what Ruth had talked about around the universal support, again, our multidisciplinary teams work very closely and offer consultation alongside our education psychology in supporting our teachers and our parents to address what the needs of the particular child, and also signpost and who is the most appropriate service to meet that particular child's needs.
Can I just add that, in a practical point of view, we try and refer most of these children before they hit school age, so that their needs are found out before they start reaching sort of areas in school where there are limits on referral, because as a paediatrician I can refer anyone to an education psychologist before they hit school. So hopefully these children are picked up before school age, and certainly the most severe ones usually are. But there's a big part of that from a medical point of view is I spent a lot of time explaining the educational process to these parents, which is maybe not my role, but in one way it sort of shows the sort of communicate how we work together, because a lot of parents, especially if you've got a 2-year-old young child with Down syndrome, being able to explain to a parent actually what the process will involve is really very helpful, and that really needs to happen early, and I think most paediatricians would be involved in that process.
The fact we have health visitors aligned to the nursery will facilitate that, so that, again, those children could be identified that potentially have, for whatever reasons, have not had access to health support and could be on referred to community paediatric colleagues.
Okay, I'm going to go to Carla next.
Thank you, and can I thank you very much for your presentation, and can I thank you for all the work that you do. I know I deal with some of you, and I really do appreciate genuinely out on the ground. It is a very hot topic out there at the minute, and I have to say, as someone who works on the ground in my constituency, it's probably one of the biggest bugbears and biggest issues that I have came across, even from I came to the Assembly. I believe, there is a step process. I believe that where parents certainly have brought it to me, it's the diagnosis, the statementing, the reasonable adjustments in the school setting, its investment and training, and making sure that the finances go into the school to assist them. And then it's also the fact that children with disabilities and special needs become adults with the same needs, and I was quite interested in your action plan for post-19, and I would appreciate if we could get maybe some more detail around that, because I do think that's a major problem out there, and certainly the public do not know what to do, the parents do not know what to do with their children whenever they reach that age, because these young people have so much to contribute to society, and we want to make sure that we tap into that. So I'd be keen to hear a wee bit more on that. I also noted your new project board. Colin touched on the parental input, and I think that is absolutely key, because some parents are just left out there not knowing where to turn to, and it is purely a lack of information, and it's a lack of knowing, this is what you're going to face whenever your child goes to school, when your child takes its first steps or whatever, it's getting that information. And is there a desire to get like a one-stop information leaflet that guides parents in the right direction?
Well, certainly our plan to produce a parent's guide will be that initial high level leaflet we would envisage, but I'm also conscious that there's that high level guide, but as colleagues have said, it's actually then as parents engage with the system that the system is open and transparent. As Ruth mentioned, the EEA will be producing a plan of its services, and indeed there's now a duty to provide between health and education authorities to provide a joint plan, so even that will provide transparency. But I know the EEA is looking at its, say, an early years service. So as Jerry said, where the move is coming, referrals coming from health and education will also be involved with the parent at that early stage, and I know perhaps the intention is to be there with the parent at the earlier stages.
Yes, I suppose that there are a couple of points, if I may just pick up on them. First of all, we have the Early Years Inclusion Service, which is a regional service, and an interim regional manager has been identified for that particular service, and we will be progressing recruitment of an enduring manager for that particular post. We then have the early years, the review in terms of early years in special schools. But just picking up the point, Carla, there around post-19, we recognise that for many children in special schools, they've been at the same school from 3 to 19. So it's an anxious time for parents when they transition, but it's also an anxious time for the schools because they've been there for such a long time. But we do have the transition service. There is comprehensive transition planning, and that does take place over a number of years in partnership with health. So that is in place. So for every young person leaving at 19, there will be a transition plan in place.
And I accept that, Ruth, but I do go back to the point, like, I have been in some nursing homes and young people with special needs are positioned in nursing homes. I just think that's wrong, and I don't think that should happen. And, you know, I just want the departments to realise that at 19, some of these children are just... They're just left.
And absolutely, that part of that action plan, you know, the work that commenced a number of years ago, I think Health are reviewing their day opportunities model. So precisely for those reasons, in terms of what are the appropriate settings for children or for young people, particularly those with the more severe learning difficulties. And Kieran, have you got more information on that?
I think because, you know, our previous executive, John Compton, talked about mature conversations. And I think maybe one of the things that's come across is the need to have a mature conversation with some of the parents, because clearly one of the things is we're not communicating a lot of information out. Primarily that, as Jerry has said, significant volume of children with special educational needs will not have health and social care needs. But those who basically are known to our system generally are those who are generally better off because they will be known and will take them through the system. So I think there's confusion about the functions and the roles around health and education. We maybe need to get better about actually demarking where there are areas of cooperation and where there are core functions. And the issue of post-19 and transition, clearly there seems, I'm a strong advocate, is there is no point in talking about person-centred planning, talking about empowerment, talking about citizenship within children's services, and then that stops at a certain age. And we need to carry that forward. And I have colleagues on the board who are very actively involved in things like the day opportunities and looking at young people not as somewhere to be housed, but actually about contributing to that through supported accommodation, through supported employment, etc. And I think there's just a point, and it is designed me a little bit that sometimes there's a perception that when the transition moves from education to health, it almost medicalises transition. When a lot of the things that actually make a difference to people will be things like benefits, will be employment, will be the things that you talked about, will be leisure, all the things that are actually generated within school and giving the people the opportunities to explore. So we need to continue that forward. And things like the development of self-directed support and personal budgets, where people actually have some choice over being able to buy some of those services rather than be slotted into them. Because clearly it's not appropriate for a young person to be slotted into a facility where there are older people. It's not meeting their needs, and it's not contributing, allowing them to contribute back into what we do. We're very good in Northern Ireland about signing up to things like the disability strategy or the UN conventions around that, which talks about the social model of disability. And we spend a significant amount of time talking about diagnosis and particular conditions. The social model is very clear, and I think that's what you're alluding to, is there are a lot of impairments out there to young people. It's not their disability per se, it is those impairments to allow them to actually exercise their rights or have their rights exercised with them. And I think that's the challenge for us in that there. And that isn't a health issue, and that isn't an education issue. That's broader than that. It's cross-departmental and it's cross-society as well. One of the concerns we have is the issue around hate crime and disability. And that's an involvement where colleagues from the Department of Justice are involved. And the number of young people where there are additional needs turning up in our criminal justice system is something we all need to address. Because it is a societal issue.
Yeah, Carla, I just wanted to pick up the point about the guide for parents, and I think you're absolutely right, having something very clear from day one that you know what to expect, but I think we could challenge ourselves even further and think about guides for the children themselves. And when we were talking about engagement, I was reflecting back to the piece of work that we had all been involved in around the provision of AHP services for children with special educational need. It was absolutely incredible hearing the views of the children themselves and how that sat sometimes in stark contrast to what we as professionals were saying or what parents were saying. So I think, you know, that is an area absolutely with parents, without a doubt. But the bigger challenge for me is how do we really get those children on board to hear what is going to make a difference to them. And one of the standout and I won't quote this directly because I don't have it in front of me, but one of the standout comments from one of the children was, everybody wants my therapy to continue, but I don't feel it's making a difference to me. And that honestly really took me back, and I thought, my goodness, that is really, really powerful. So you have our commitment that we will push the boundaries on that to support that work.
Okay, I want to move now to Rosemary.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you. I'm interested in the work between the health and the educational professionals working together. You talked about preschool children having a named health visitor. You talked about communicate. Then progressed on that there's generally from schools. There's schools to health. There's a bit of a communications problem. Would it be possible perhaps to look at a named health visitor? I use the word health visitor very loosely in relation to having one specific person that parents in a school could speak to in relation to health issues or concerns in primary and post-primary education, and that they could liaise with the pastoral care officer. So there would be one named person for parents to communicate with if they have an issue.
Okay, thank you. Yes, you're right. There's now all families will have a named health visitor, and we've pushed that boundary and now allocated a health visitor for each of the preschool settings, the funded preschool settings. Whenever the child transfers into the school environment, the responsibility for their health and social care needs and a universal element is picked up from our school nursing. And again, school nursing do offer a core programme, Year 1 and Year 8, and it's under the Healthy Child, Healthy Futures that is working very well now. Obviously, school nursing have a lot of safeguarding needs because, again, some of the safeguarding issues associated with that particular group of children, but they address immunisation. They do screening of the child's health, weight, and also vision and hearing screening, so to identify again early. So schools would have aligned school nurse that they would be in consultation with, that would work very closely again with education colleagues, but again the duty itself will push us even further to integrate that much wider as we learn from the health visiting work and also the transfer of that information. So whenever the child transfers into primary school, all the information that has been identified from health visiting will pass over to school nursing.
Yeah, and do the parents know the name of that nurse and a telephone number that they can pick up the phone and say, I have concerns about my child?
Well, I suppose we're unsure whether all parents would know that, but again, there's a mechanism for the schools to make that contact. And again, we've got paediatrics and the general practice. A lot of our GPs would be aware of who the school nurses are in that locality. So that it's signposting, because again, you may have a named person, but if that person moves post, then it's important that they have a contact for the location and the clinic that professional works from, and someone to pick up the needs of that particular child if there are issues, because we can't delay in making contact if that person has moved on. So there would be good connections, and schools would have close contact with school nursing who go in and do that core programme.
Okay, and just one other question, and this is on inclusiveness, special educational needs and inclusiveness in our primary and post-primary schools. For example, I'm from a country area, and there was a local young Down syndrome person who's educated locally at the local primary school, and now who's now post-19, which Carla spoke about. She is now gainfully employed in the local primary school, and I think she was educated in the local primary school, and she built up a rapport with the children of her age at that stage. She's known locally, and she now is gainfully employed. And I think maybe perhaps it was a small local primary school, and I think we've got to think about something
Can I just basically, most children with Down syndrome in Northern Ireland go to a local primary school. Actually, not just in Fermanagh, where I'm from
Fermanagh,
absolutely. And that would be the same across most of Northern Ireland. So it depends on the degree of severity of problems, and also then as children go into secondary school, sometimes that becomes more it becomes a parental decision as to whether they go to a special school or a mainstream school. And it is always a parental decision. And certainly from a clinical point of view, I would always recommend to parents, when I'm seeing children like this, is they need to go and see both local mainstream schools and special schools and decide for themselves which they feel that as a parent gives the best opportunity for their child. And I think it's important to have both those opportunities there.
I would completely concur with Jerry in that we have over 18,000 statemented children across the authority, and just over 5,000 are in a special school setting, so the majority of children have their education in a mainstream setting.
Yeah, and they would get meaningful, perhaps gainful employment then at the end of the day.
Yes.
In there. Yeah, and just with inclusiveness, sorry.
Can I respond to that? Because I'm sort of sitting on both sides of the table here, both in terms of the professional side, but also as a parent, with 2 children who are in the statement process. We have a little boy with Down syndrome, and we did go down the route of mainstream schools for him. It didn't meet his needs, and I think that was the important thing that Jerry's pointing out. That, you know, there is a bit around. There are a lot of kids out there with Down syndrome, but their needs are very different within that, and it's actually about assessing that. And I think the benefits for us as in terms of parents was the ability to actually have the choice that there were facilities or there were services that actually met those needs. And I think it's back to the point again, is that, you know, we should move away from actually focusing around sort of issues around that, actually start back about the needs assessment bit and focus on the needs. And that clearly is within health. We don't assess children with special educational needs, we assess children with health and social care needs. And that is different, slightly different. But there is the issue around that that element of a continuum of service is available. And we have friends who have kids who are in mainstream school who do very well, and fair play to that there. And there are other children who need that additional support. And that's the important thing, that it's the right place at the right time.
And on the inclusiveness, children with hearing problems, many of them now attend Jordanstown. Are there any thoughts on perhaps integrating them into their local primary and post-primary schools with obviously help?
Yes, we have around 3% of the statemented children population have sensory impairment, which would include hearing impairment, and a number of those children do attend the school in Jordanstown, but many are integrated into a mainstream setting. As part of the strategic area plan for the Education Authority, one of the areas we will be exploring is those specialist settings, special schools with a specialist emphasis. We want to explore how we can increase access to specialist support across the authority. So that's another area of work at the moment that's out for consultation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Rosemary. Catherine?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for being here today and for presenting to us on this issue. My first question is just sort of like a follow-on from Rosemary's, and it's around the access to occupational therapy, other therapies, and the likes of multidisciplinary teams. Is that equal irrespective of whether you're a child with additional educational needs in a mainstream school as it would be in a special school? Obviously with the exception of maybe equipment for children with severe disabilities, and I understand that, but in relation outside of that, would it be equal for those children who do opt for mainstream education? And I appreciate that isn't the best route for all.
Yes, in health, and Geraldine will probably come in after this, but in health we assess the needs of the child irrespective of where they're educated, and we provide across a whole range of facilities, be it in the child's own home, be it in a school environment, be it in the clinical environment. So the answer is yes, the process is equitable for those children.
I suppose then, Catherine, we do have special input for AHPs in OT, physical and speech and language in our special school environment. We're very fortunate, and I alluded to that earlier about the multidisciplinary teams, that are staff going in, that is AHPs and also behavioural support, going in and supporting children in mainstream, potentially not even on at below stage 3 of the code of practice. If there's children with additional needs who need equipment, we have the therapists. They will be, again, as Michelle said, their assessment will look at the environment. Once the placement's identified, we will work very closely with our education colleagues and Education Authority in identifying the equipment needs or any structural changes to that environment to increase the independence of the child and their access to the curriculum.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's also worth noting things like, in terms of Sure Start, we've now got a situation where we have speech and language service employed to actually help support children at that very, very early stage. And I think that's been rolled out regionally across Northern Ireland, and we've just made a number of appointments for that. And that's been in conjunction and partnership with the Department of Education.
Brilliant, thank you. My second question is in relation to the statement process. And obviously, I do appreciate that there are a far greater amount of areas where health and education cooperate great than there are not. But unfortunately, we hear about when that cooperation doesn't work out. And at the minute, we have a figure of around 60% of statements not being delivered within the statutory framework and timescales. And that's a concern, obviously, because children who need intervention are then getting intervention much later than is required, which impacts on their development. So can I ask, you are aware of that? There is a suggestion that that's more to do with the health and social care side than the education side. I don't know how true that is, but can I ask what actions you're taking to address that and when we will start to see a decrease in that figure?
I think I would refer back just to that particular project team and looking at the processes. And yes, I mean, we have also discussed, what are the reasons for that and what that I don't think it's too simple to say it's an issue with the health and social care side, because I think what we've identified and the project team have identified that there's steps that the EA can take and ways that we can look at the process again that actually make it easier for health likewise, so it's both parties working together.
Yeah, I think it's also important to add, Catherine, that those children in many cases will be receiving stage 3 services whilst they're waiting for the completion of the statutory assessment process. And again, schools, a responsibility upon the schools to make reasonable adjustments as well.
I think there's a big equity issue here, because we are currently working within certain timeframes within the health of either 9 or 13 weeks, whereas there's a 6-week timeframe for reporting from an education point of view. So should I see a child to give an education report within 6 weeks, or should I see a child who's been referred up with query cerebral palsy? Which takes preference? And certainly from my point of view as a clinician, I can't prioritise one child over another. And I think that's a really important thing. And the priority should be based on the clinical need rather than necessarily arbitrary differing timescales. And I appreciate the importance of education and the importance of not missing time. And that's really important. But also, there's a similar importance of not missing the clinical diagnosis.
Yeah, and I suppose, I'm not, really, really had on the timescales. The point is that there are children waiting too long for their statement. Yeah. So, irrespective of whether it's 6 weeks, 18 weeks, there's children waiting longer than that. So my question, and I think it's an important one, is the 60% figure. When are we going to see that coming down so that we don't have children waiting that length of time?
Example being the project that I told you about, that we've actually improved our figures over the last couple of years by changing the process. And I think that's an example. And if we can get that replicated over in Northern Ireland, I think you will see some figures. So I would hope that will start to make some changes.
Again, Catherine, just want to reassure you, and we are not satisfied both in health and education that the children are delayed in receiving the statement that they need to access the curriculum. So there is a strong commitment and passion to try and improve that. And already we were proactive, both in health and education, in looking at that first stage of the process through to community paediatrics and piloting improvements through technology to try and improve that process. That will be taken on through this new notification referral and statutory assessment group. So at all stages and levels within both organisations, there is a commitment that we do where we can make a change and improve the timeframe for children. We want to see that happening.
Certainly, we highlighted earlier, some of the elements of that, and we're certainly not in the space of only wanting to roll everything out as a final package. And what the project team and then the project board will do, will keep pushing ahead on those areas that have been piloted and are working with a view to trying to implement that across Northern Ireland.
There's lots of legislative challenges for trusts, and I feel sorry for them sometimes, but clearly we've had a duty to cooperate with education from 1995 in the Children's Order around special educational needs. But there is an issue that, one of the things that we are constrained by is with some of our legislation, which may seem slightly contrary to some of the discussions that we have today. Trusts can't issue information back without consent. The only issue that we can actually provide consent will be if there's criminal proceedings or the child protection. It's about the release of information around personal health and social care information in relation to a child. That takes time to get that. That takes time to ask parents, and that's important. But the staff within the trust are constrained by having to do that, and they have to get that. So if there are mechanisms that we can actually short-circuit some of those practical difficulties and move through that, I think those are very easily, it's low-hanging fruit if we can do it. And I think that will certainly speed up some of the issues.
If I may,
Carla, Ruth.
Supplementary.
If I may also add, just in response to Catherine's question, the other side of your question is the authority's commitment to enhancing Stage 3 services. So as we enhance Stage 3 services across the authority, there may be a reduction in the number of children and young people coming forward as part of the statutory process.
And just in line with that, again, health and education are being proactive because, yes, children with special education needs, it is crucial that they get the support they need, but also the children that potentially at that lower stage that they need an integrated, both in a health prevention and promotion model. We're being proactive to try and address that so that children are not having as much difficulties accessing the curriculum.
Carla, I think Catherine wants to conclude this, and then I'll let Carla in.
And I appreciate that you are all committed to young people and young people getting their statements. I don't doubt that for a second. And I appreciate that you have plans and you have ideas. But my question still remains unanswered. When will that 60% figure be driven down and the backlog dealt with? You know, what is the time frame? Is it a year? Is it 6 months? Is it 3 months? Is it down to 40% as we're sitting now? Because the reality is that there's a backlog that we haven't dealt with, that needs dealt with, and until it's dealt with, that figure will not go down, it'll increase.
And it is, and there are hard conversations to be had. You know, there is a waiting list in terms of the SEN. There's a waiting list in all parts of the health service, and that's none of that's right. But that is where it is at the minute. We've looked at the SEN proposals across the water in England. They're significantly similar in terms of joint planning. There's been a huge amount of additional resource put in place for that. We have a situation, and Jerry will talk about the practical issues around actually trying to manage all the conflicting demands around what is required from the health side, from our minister, from the targets, but also from the fact that we're in a context of, at this point in time, I think about your 4 members of staff that you can't appoint, and throwing money at that will not solve that because those people are not there. And I can't give you a straight answer for that, Catherine, to be frank, and I don't think it would be right for me to say we will achieve that when some of these things are outside of our
It's more about
control.
when is it going to get better. You know, I'm not looking more money through it, or I'm looking to know when are we going to see an improvement, and I'm not looking the figure dropping down 0% in a time frame that you give me today, but when is there going to be an improvement? When will we see it getting better?
In terms of our particular project that's working, in fairness, it's only on the notification and referral and statementing process. I mean, health folks are meeting before Christmas, and likewise, education and then health after Christmas. And what we're aiming for in terms of that particular project is for implementation of a number of the proposals from April 17. Now, as I said earlier, if there's some that we can implement before that, because we're confident that they will make a difference, we will certainly do that. But I would like to think, now there's obviously then going to be a time lag by the time we report back to you and look across the yearly stats or 6 monthly stats. But I would like to think that as soon as you make those practical improvements, there will be for a number of children a speedier way through the process, because as Jerry referred to earlier, there are maybe a good number of children where actually they don't have any significant health need, and we're looking at ways of then speeding even that cohort of children through the process. There will always be others where paediatricians will want to
well, it's the group that are the most severe, who are usually known to paediatrics in the first place, and those reports normally go in time, certainly within the Western Trust, because we know them. We don't need to see them specially, because we've seen them within the past few months, so we can usually give that report really within the time frame. There's then the group who don't really have any needs, for example, the dyslexic kids who may not have any other health needs. And again, if we take them out of the process by being able to say, well, actually, there's no health needs here, their statement can proceed reasonably quickly. The middle ones are probably the more difficult group, who need a face-to-face appointment, and obviously the timescales for face-to-face appointments, as we all know, the waiting lists within health are increasing. But if we can get those two ends, hopefully we can almost meet in the middle, if that makes sense.
I think it's really important as well. There's always a risk that you can create almost like a knee-jerk reaction and try and solve the problem that's in front of you now, and then in 6 months, a year's time, you're faced with the same issues. So that particular group are really focused on how do we actually create solutions that are going to last. And as part of that process, there's a considerable amount of work to do to actually examine what the core issues are that potentially create delays. Some of those are relatively obvious and we can start to address them, as you say, as early as April 17, but some of those are much more complicated. And the benefit is we're now in the room together working out from both sides how we actually can create those longer term solutions. So I would say you'll see some changes very quickly. I can't give you figures on that, but some of them will actually be longer term.
Can I move now to Sandra, unless Carla wanted a wee supplementary?
Just very, very quickly, I believe it's a time allocation method that's used within schools for educational psychology referrals, because principals will all tell us that we can only refer 2 per year. And then, you have to take it on priority, and that leaves someone there for the next year. So I think that's a big problem.
Sandra?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for coming again today. This is a big issue, and I don't know, we seem to be saying the same things time and time again. I mean, we all agree that for the benefit of children, the SEN support, there needs to be a huge improvement than what's happening at the moment. And just what Carla said, I'm just going to... I've all my questions here, and whether it's been said before, I'm going to emphasise it again, but there needs to be an improvement, and there's a huge concern that schools are limited in the number of children that are being referred for assessment, whether that's due to a limit in budget or whether that's due to a limit in resources. But we need to improve on this, and I think Colin referred to that as well. I think some of the issues that have been raised with me, and you mentioned looking at technology, the schools have a huge amount of form filling to put in, and I mentioned this to you before. And so is that something you're going to look at, and not just paper that needs to be written on and written on again and written on again for each stage of the process? I think maybe I'll just keep talking and you can answer at the end, if you don't mind. The cost of SEN has increased by 60 million a year over the past 4 years, and are you going to see that coming down? And are you looking innovatively at educational psychologists, for instance, and how they're employed, on how schools maybe allocate certain educational psychologists to group schools as opposed to the way that you're doing it currently? Do you know, are you thinking outside the box in terms of that, for instance? And as Catherine had kept asking about time frame, and I mean, we're looking forward, obviously, with anticipation to the regs and the code of practice, January and February next year. And I sort of anticipated that would be the end of the process, and we'd see improvements starting from when those are being implemented. Is that not the case? And my final part of the question is, in relation to budget then, are you costing what you're changing, and will you be bidding for increased budget, or what money-wise, what do you need to deliver, basically?
I think in terms of those improvements that we're looking at in these different projects, that is actually about using our existing resources more effectively, because actually I think that's where we have to start off. So we don't envisage that requiring additional money, and we will do everything we can in terms of improvements. In terms of the regulations and code and improvements there, well, absolutely, we're coming to you next fairly in the new year on the regs, and the code is going out for consultation next year. Those do provide the overarching structures, but at the end of the day, it's the implementation and operation as well, so it probably does go hand in hand. And as Ruth said earlier, hopefully there's such a focus on statements because parents see that as the only goal or the end goal. But if actually we have a very transparent system of supports at the school-based stage and also the Schools Plus stage, which will be the current stage 3, then if children are being supported, there won't be the need to go forward for the statementing because the adequate supports will be there. Obviously, that will take some time to turn around. On that issue of form filling, which you raised previously, I mean, absolutely, we've gone back to look at that, and what we're hoping to do, and this will be picked up as part of the new processes and the new framework, is that as we develop the new personal learning plan, the structure of that and the information on that, we have some thoughts whereby the information that schools capture there and those sorts of things would then be built on in terms of referrals to ed psychs, would then be built on in terms of any annual review, so that absolutely schools aren't filling in ad nauseum totally different forms. And that's certainly something from the previous session that we're going to go and look at, because a lot of it is in and around the same information, and actually if we can just capture it and it's maybe only building on it at each time, it'll ease up the system.
Yes, maybe if I could just pick up a point. We do have a very highly skilled educational psychology workforce across the region, who we would wish to use increasingly for interventions, direct interventions with children and young people. But around the time allocation, the time allocation model is the agreed. It's the minimum time allocation to a school for stage 3, and it's important just to clarify that the statutory work is over and above that, alongside other work. And schools, the educational psychologists in partnership with schools, our expectation is that they meet to discuss children, and that the psychologist assists the school in prioritising the children to go forward for assessment, but equally the EP assists the school in signposting to other EA services and supports, which perhaps may be more appropriate actually at that stage than an assessment at a particular point in time.
From a health perspective, we haven't costed this out, and Jerry will speak from experience, but the increasing demand year on year, because SEN is one part of the referral from education, but there are other parts coming in as well. When we started off,
You haven't costed it, is that what you're saying?
this hasn't been costed from a health perspective.
What you going to?
Well, I think we're going to need to. It's a reality. But even
certainly, the demands certainly on our service have increased since, well, in the 13 years I've been in post. It's gone up. The number of statements requests has gone up at least 50%. The number of multiple so for example, a lot of these children might get statement in nursery school. There's then a second request when they enter into primary school, another request when they go into secondary school, and then a request for information at transition. So there's an awful lot of information being requested, and as you say, there's certainly been no increase in our the funding coming through into our service, and as Kieran's also but we can't actually get people to work. There's massive gaps in the community paediatric service across all of Northern Ireland.
Do people don't want to go into that job, or what's the issue?
There are gaps in multiple different specialties across Northern Ireland. It's linked in with child protection, which often isn't always the most attractive specialty for people to go into. It's often linked in with acute paediatrics as well. So it is difficult to get people to come to work in the specialty. Yes.
Sorry, Chairman. Are these third level educated?
Certainly, if you're thinking of a community, this is in the medical from a medical point of view. So obviously, these are people who've gone through. It varies. There's consultants and non-consultants. So some of them will come through a sort of full paediatric training scheme. Mm-hmm. Other people come in at a sort of more other level. Sort of. In the past, we would have taken a lot of our non-consultants through from general practice. It was usually more of a 9-to-5 job, which fit very well with family life. But with the fact that GPs no longer have to do out of hours, they can decide not to. It has become much harder to get people to come in to leave general practice and come in to work in paediatrics.
It is a significant concern because, as Jerry said, community paediatrics for us are vital in terms of not only this area, but in terms of looked after children with very complex healthcare needs, the issues around child protection. So they are a core and important part of a bigger part of the children's service. And that's why we need to actually look at what the impact, because there is the law of unintended consequences. If you put pressure on one part of this, what has to give? And it's back to the issue is, regardless of that, the priority within health and social care will always have to be the health and social care clinical needs, not only in terms of our legislation, but also in terms of the professional practices required.
I think we're describing some of the very practical ways in which we struggle to deliver. But I think that aside,
we've got to be very clear of our commitment to do what we need to do for this group of children. And certainly on the health side, we will look at all of our systems and processes and our commissioning arrangements to see how we can do that in the best possible way, notwithstanding some of that will be a challenge.
Can I just say,
we will do what we can.
After the last committee, we convened with PHA colleagues, the health group. We had every senior paediatrician in Northern Ireland turn up for those meetings at that point in time. Now, you consider the pressures in the service, but that was the commitment that each of those afforded to that particular subject.
Okay, I have to go now to Morris. Morrow.
Sure. Well, that's the problem with coming fast, isn't it? in some format or format or other. I've little doubt that what we've heard here today is exceptionally well intended. And I think you're making an honest attempt to address a very, very difficult area. I'm not sure that you're going to be as successful as you'd hope to be. Because when I look at these figures here, I see very, very startling figures. But the one thing that concerns me greatly is the report appears to indicate that possibly as many as 4,000 children with autism have SEN statements. Now, the telling part is this autism figure also appears to have doubled in the last 7 years. Now, if it has doubled in the last 7 years, it must be reasonable to assume it's going to double again in the next 7 years, or maybe that's a bit wrong. But I think that if you're going to demonstrate in a more practical way, I think you need an indicative timetable here as to when you're going to be, how you're going to do this, what period of time it's going to take across that. You have a phenomenal figure there of what is it, 22% of children with SENs. And when you drill down into that, that's a big figure. That's a very big figure of what, 74,000, 80,000, 75,000 children. That figure is going to keep increasing, irrespective of how many you take off at the other end, because this seems to be in perpetuity that is coming. Is there any figures or any study that's ever been done as to why so many children are now coming in on SEN?
Well, we are looking at, the figures I think you refer to, yes, in the 15-16 school census, 22% of the pupil population is on the SEN register. Now that's stages 1 to 5. So stages 1 and 2 are purely the school. It's down to the school to put the child in the SEN register. So sometimes those pupils at stage 1 will have very, very mild needs and may come on and off, or sometimes actually they stay on and don't come off. And the department does want to drill down into some of those figures and the use of the SEN register and the categorisation of SEN at different stages to see, well, look, what is behind the figures and is that a true reflection of the pupil population. I think
when do you see that and I understand what you're saying, drilling down to this figure of 74,000 to get it broken down into perhaps categories. Do you have any figures on that?
We do. At the moment, are you working on that? At the moment, the school census does capture the types of SEN. What we want to do is we're actually doing a bit of a project at the moment to revisit those categories so that they're more accurately, makes it easier for schools to categorise what the needs of the children are. And that will allow us then for the Education Authority and ourselves to see, well, look, what are the needs and the services that need to be aligned to be addressed, and a bit more detail on that.
Yes, and there is a breakdown at stage 5, so we have a breakdown in terms of the profile of need across the region for those children with a statement, and that does assist us in provision planning for the future.
I suppose as from a health and social care, we have just had the release of the Bengal report, and it outlines, we're all very aware across all member agencies that there's demographic changes and there's a rise in demand, but there's a commitment again with our ministers delivering together document that we all, and with health and social care, we are committed that we're going to rethink of how we deliver health and social care. That will include providing the services to the children, focusing on prevention and early intervention, and partnership working is key, because we need to kind of look at our resources pool and use the staff that we have in an integrated fashion, that there's no duplication and that the child do get seamless programmes of care. So I suppose we're early stages in that, and across all of our programmes of care and health and social care systems, no different than education. We're under significant pressures. But again, sometimes that pushes innovation even further. And we've got the mechanism now to look in depth at what, in each stage of the code of practice, what are the needs, whilst realising EITP will be very closely monitored and reported on. And we're moving away from that elective target and numbers of children and patients seen, and really an outcome basis. So what has made the difference? So I suppose it's kind of an exciting time from that point of view, because though the demand and pressures are there, we're going to look at it in a different way, and that has pushed us even to work much more collaboratively than possibly done in the past.
I think one of the big issues around is actually sharing the information, because you talked a lot about the figures, and sometimes in the past, and our figures and education figures didn't tally up. So I think we're now in an opportunity where we actually can assess some of the information that's coming through the health side and also through the education side, and actually start to have some of those, to maybe ask some of those questions that need to be started the journey about where the things are going. I know there's a massive increase in the number of people waiting for diagnosis for autism, but I also know that our Children's Disability Service, which are very focused on the assessment of need, there's only about 4,500 children in that service. So clearly, if the journey is all about getting a diagnosis, but they're not coming into the health and social care system post that, what's the questions we need to be asking about that, and where is that? What's happening with that? And I think that is, and perhaps it may be seen in some of the impact around the SEN world. We don't know, but I think if we can collate some of that information and start to have some robust conversations about what the data is telling us, I think that's a good start about maybe answering some of the questions yourselves. As where is some of the activity coming from?
And I think what you're saying is that there is no short-term fix here, or no quick fix. I think whenever you go back to the Bidengore report, you're talking about a 10-year programme here. So there's going to be a lot of issues inside that time scale of 10 years, and that, in fairness to you, is not of your making, and it's something that you have to grapple with and work with and try to. This is something that comes across all of our desks on a continual basis, and the one thing it continually comes across, the lack of communication. And I think, Ruth, you said that that was something you're looking at or have looked at. I'm not quite sure which it was, and that's to be welcomed, because I think that there is a real issue there in getting communicating. Even those of us who are writing and asking it, we sometimes have to wait quite a while too to get the response. But we can understand why. We can understand why. While maybe those who are talking to us haven't got as clear an understanding.
I think
that's the world we live in.
Chris, okay.
Okay, Chair, thanks. Forgive me if I'm short, but I know we're pushed for time. Early and accurate diagnosis, early intervention are the priorities for parents in these situations, and that's going to require highest standard of cooperation between education and health. We've discussed the breach of the statement of special education needs. What percentage of statements of special educational needs breach the statutory time period of 6 months for the issue of final statements?
I think I'd like to write to you on that, just to get the absolutely accurate figure, because obviously, although we have an EA, there's still we still need to collate the statistics from across the different regions. And I think if we come back to
the committee on that,
I don't have the rough figure now.
Is there a target?
Well, the target is that we want statements to be 100% within 26 weeks. Now, the legislation recognises that that's not always going to be possible for various scenarios, and that's why you have the valid exceptions to the 26-week rule. But I'd rather come back to you rather than give you an incorrect guess.
Do you know?
We're collating that information with the EA. I know there's an outstanding assembly question in relation to it, so we are collating that information.
Yes, and in terms of awareness around the valid exceptions, there are a number of valid exceptions that are catered for within the statutory framework.
That's slightly concerning that you don't know the percentage. What is a valid exception?
A valid exception could be, for example, where an appointment hasn't been kept, or there could be family circumstances that haven't allowed advice to come through, family bereavement, for example, delay in trusted advice, school closure and holidays are valid exceptions as well.
Right. Delay in trusted advice.
For attendance to these meetings, you just say actually isn't good.
What's the most common valid exception? Do you know? Is it delay in trusted advice?
Yeah. It is, but there are a number of reasons for that.
Do you think that needs to be reviewed, or are those valid exceptions?
Well, that's what we're doing. Yeah.
I've got obviously. MLA for Belfast, so have a particular Belfast interest. It'd be interesting to know if the percentage of breaches varies from trust as well. But in asking some questions around this, the information I was being given is that issues, you've touched on all of them already, in terms of difficulties recruiting community paediatricians. In Belfast, there was difficulty recruiting a specialty doctor and a consultant paediatrician. They're not budgetary. There are budgetary issues here, but that's not a budgetary issue.
And to be honest, every trust in Northern Ireland has those issues.
Well, you touched on that slightly, but why is it so difficult?
It's
How can we
difficult
not
across
appoint a single specialty doctor and a single consultant paediatrician?
Because they aren't there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've gone out to advertise multiple times. We've gone out to advertise both locally, nationally, internationally. We have recently been out we've recruited an agency to try and recruit overseas, which we would then interview via video. You know, we have been through a very, very prolonged attempt to sort of, and that's not just community. Acute paediatrics is similar. You know, paediatrics is not popular specialty because it's considered a very busy specialty. It's considered, you know, it's considered hard. Okay, so it's very difficult to actually, you know. But we
have to look at other ways of incentivising it, or what? It seems to be a vital cog in a wheel here.
It's probably worth pointing out.
That's beyond my sort of area.
The Department of Health has recognised that there are across a range of the professional groups challenges in filling some of the posts, and they have a process in place to carry out some robust workforce planning projects in some of those areas. I don't have the details of those, but that will go some way to examining some of those problems.
This is the detail that we need to get into on this.
Yeah.
You know, we can talk about working groups and forward plans, but we need to know what the issues are. This seems to be one of the key ones. In other answers as well, the Minister for Health told me that changes to the EA Belfast region referral criteria meant that mechanisms are no longer in place within the Health and Social Care Trust for children to access educational psychology whilst awaiting a child development clinic appointment. So I should say that obviously the child development clinic issue is linked to the absence of community paediatricians, but that there seems to be a breakdown of cooperation there. Can anybody give me any advice as to why that referral criteria mechanism was changed, and why, if you're waiting for a child development clinic assessment, you can't access educational psychology in Belfast?
I don't know, certainly in the West, for example, one of my patients is waiting to see me and is seen by another member of the health visitor or a speech therapist, and it's very clear that child's going to have educational issues. The Education Authority do accept me that we have a process where they come and chat to me, and I think it's appropriate. I will put in a referral to education, and that does bypass gaps, waiting times. Now, why that? But I know in other parts of Northern Ireland it doesn't happen. So, in one way, that's a sort of probably something the Education Authority, or I'm not sure. There's obviously variations in practice, which based on the previous 5 boards, which hopefully will change when it's. Hopefully not, so that they all make the decision not to accept a referral.
I think Carla and David have meetings in Stormont at 2 that you're panicking for. Thanks very much. Now, can you just conclude, Chris, please?
Is that something that the project board is looking at?
That first project is around notification and referral and assessment, so that will include those early notifications and referrals.
Chair, I think there are, obviously I only have Belfast to work from in more detail than other areas, but the wider theme here is cooperation between health and education. Mechanisms have been put in place to try and improve that. There seem to be significant issues where cooperation is breaking down, that does need to address.
I think
that's the specific examples I have available to me, and there are multiple issues there in terms of recruitment, referral mechanisms and pathways, and hopefully that's what will be gone into in more detail.
And I think that's where we as a project board will be like picking up those issues, because it's not just one project, it's a series of projects, and looking where in the system we need to prioritise our focus, definitely, and that's helpful to know.
Very closing, I think the waiting list for autism assessment in Belfast is something like 2 years, which is...
But one way, I'm very clear that from a medical point of view, a diagnosis is not what it should not be delaying this special education. This is an assessment of a child's needs, not of a child's diagnosis.
Right.
And a child not having a diagnosis should not delay a child going through this process.
You have the other complication that it's then for the school to provide the resources in response as well, once if and when a diagnosis or a statement is in place.
It's the authority's duty to make provision
Okay.
when a statement is in place.
So they resource the school to do that then?
Yes, based on the assessed need. But
Right.
equally, we have the Autism Advisory and Intervention Service to provide support and advice pre-statement as well as post.
Okay, we're going to
thanks, thank you.
We're going to undoubtedly come back to this. This is a very involved session, lengthy session. We're going to come back to this theme. But Caroline, do you want to make a final comment?
No, I'm just welcome the engagement, and certainly some of the issues that have been raised are helpful for us as we continue our work, and certainly we'll pick up on those and feed into. We're meeting as a project board next week, and we'll certainly have a review of some of the issues that have been raised today.
Okay. Can I thank you very much, the team of 6, for coming along today. Thank you very much. And as you take your leave, we'll reflect on agreed actions, maybe. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
So,
So, Chairperson, as members are aware, the Department will be back in January and February to provide evidence on the new SEND Act regulations and the SEND Code of Practice. Sounds, as the Chairperson's indicated, members are not done with this health education cooperation subject. So it's suggested then in the interim that the committee writes to the Education Authority seeking further information on its regional language and communication service, which is to be launched in 2017. This is in written questions. It's also suggested the committee write to the department, asking them on a couple of things. Firstly, asking them question 2 and question 6. Question 2 is about the Allied Health Professionals and Multidisciplinary Support Teams review, which happened in the last mandate and I understood concluded. And number 6 was basically the key things that dropped out of the stakeholder event, and asking the department to comment on those. Also, to ask them for the SEN Stage 5 breakdown. So they indicated there they have further information on the SEN Stage 5 children. And the committee, just to remind members, we'd written on the 14th of October seeking an update on SEN assessments. What's a valid definition? How many are late? No answer provided, so we can remind them on that subject. And then also suggest that we would share the stakeholder event findings with the Committee for Health. If members are content with that, we may be back on this again.
But to be able to get a flavour of how a school refers in for special needs, for the assessment process, because I was talking to Sandra during the meeting there just to get some update, and it seems that there's a difference maybe in what may happen in different places, but it's this concept that a principal can only refer so many people, or only has so many bites of the cherry in terms of referring children through. And if you have a school that has 5 or 6 or 7 people that may need some form of need, but the school can only send in 2, do they just ignore it? Do they prioritise them? But what?
It's a big subject, yeah.
Chair, the committee wrote about this also on the, I think it was also on the 14th of October, on this very subject. We got a partial answer from the Education Authority, which is in PACS, but we're awaiting an answer from the department, which has not been provided. So we've asked the question. I'll remind them.
Yeah, because I asked that today and didn't get the answer.
And it is just to say, the Children's Law Centre would tell you that a parent can actually request a referral. So if the principal has her allocation succeeded, you as a parent can go, and they have to. They have a statutory duty to assess the child, but that's not known out there.
No,
Parents who aren't, aren't told that information. That's the reality.
Yeah, but the parents can then be put in a waiting list to have the child assessed, and that's it starts to break down.
Okay, we've agreed on our actions here, members. Chris?
Yeah, can we pose what percentage of statements breach the statutory timescale?
That was the question we asked on the 14th of October. Yes. Yes.
There's real problems, it seems, with the statement and process across the board in multiple different ways. Do we have this down as a potential inquiry down the line?
Well, because the audit office are undertaking a review on special educational needs now, and they're due to report in March, which will then be taken on by Public Accounts Committee. That was our problem. I knew members wanted to do it, but that was the issue, that PAC will get first go at this. Is it also, Chairperson, the case that members are content to write to the Department seeking sight of the annual Sure Start targets and the latest 6-monthly report on outcomes from the Health and Social Care Board? Again, this is from written questions. Ms Seeley, I think.
Okay. Just to remind you, Chris, too, we've had an inquiry into educational underachievement. You would run two at the same time.
We do.
Okay, moving into Chairperson's business, right? Thanks very much. We've agreed actions. I want to record the committee's thanks to the principal, staff and students of Stranmillis University College for hosting today's meeting, and just to seek your agreement to write to the college accordingly. I'm sure that's agreed. And I want to just remind members to note an invitation from Stranmillis to attend a Christmas concert on the 15th of December at 7 o'clock in St Bartholomew's Church, Stranmillis. So that's that, doesn't require any action. Nope. Informal briefings then, 8.2. I want to remind you that the committee met informally with PTA on Monday, and the department in respect of PISA, which we now know to be Programme for International Student Assessment, on Tuesday. I want to record the committee's congratulations to post-primary pupils, schools and teachers on the PISA results. They show that this region compares well with other jurisdictions. However, there are clearly remaining challenges in respect of the ability of children who are unlucky enough to be from impoverished backgrounds. Assembly Research will brief us on PISA and TIMS in January. Could be PISA for all I know, but it's PISA. I suspect there are education professionals to my left who know what they're talking about. But that briefing was useful. I thought the briefing on PISA, that one of the most significant outcomes was that a child can lose the equivalent of 2 2/3 years schooling if you come from a socially disadvantaged background. To quantify it in those terms, it's the equivalent of losing 2 2/3 years. Okay, moving now, 8.3, NCB report on sharing best practice. I want to refer members to recent written answers, which include reference to a report by the National Children's Bureau on the sharing of best practice in schools. And I want to seek your agreement to write to the department seeking sight of the report when it is published in 2017. And that's agreed. 8.4, sectoral audit of Brexit. I want to refer members to recent written answers, which include reference to a sectoral report undertaken by the department on the impact of Brexit. So I want to seek your agreement to write to the department seeking sight of this report, and the committee could agree to treat the report as confidential if necessary. Is that agreed, members?
Great, so treating it as confidential then?
Okay.
Can I just ask why we're treating it as confidential?
The Minister indicated in written answers that he would not be publishing the report. So that if the committee asked to see it but agreed that it wouldn't publish it, then, well, you might find out what it says.
Can I ask, did he give a reason why it would remain confidential?
He said it was not appropriate at this time for it to be published.
Okay,
Doesn't
so
like what's in it.
Okay, the committee is going to seek sight of that report, and we're going to agree to treat it as confidential in the meantime. Okay, thank you.
What item was that?
If we agree,
Yeah.
we can disagree and we can vote and we can do everything.
But we won't get it if we don't agree to keep it confidential.
We're at Chair's business.
Okay.
There was a written question this week from, I think, Mr. Allister, asking to see sight of the sectoral report on Brexit.
What is the sectoral report on Brexit?
The North-South Ministerial Council statement indicated that all of the departments had undertaken sectoral audits of the impact of Brexit on their relevant responsibilities. My guess would be that maybe the executive's taking the line, they're not going to publish any of them. My suspicion might be that the education report might not say very much. So it might be that the department would be willing to show us that as long as we didn't publish it. And thus, break ranks, have them breaking ranks with the rest of the departments, at a guess.
I'm sure, Chair, as you can imagine, I'm not really in the form for taking votes today.
Yes.
I'm not sure that I'm well
Get them
lined up
through,
for that.
get them through.
I'm not well equipped for that, so happy to agree on.
Okay, and that's
We'll
agreed.
give you that one.
Okay. Morris, where are you when I need you? Okay. Vacated Sites Working Group. I want to refer members to recent written answers relating to the Stroul campus, which include reference to the Vacated Sites Working Group. I want to seek your agreement to write to the department, seeking sight of the terms of reference and the timeline for reporting for the group. Okay, agreed?
My right said it was reported this week that the Stroul campus will cost £60 million more than originally estimated.
Chairperson, the committee is well aware of this. We actually questioned members on this, Devil, I think in September. I think the Minister gave another, he clarified question time that there was an optimisation bias, but we've even had an explanation of the optimisation bias from
News management, that came out on a Monday, Saturday, Sunday would be late. They were reporting on something that we already knew several months ago, as I understand it.
Yep.
Okay.
Bias is normally 5%.
Okay. 8.6 e-safety strategy. I want to welcome the ministerial commentary yesterday indicating that a new e-safety strategy for schools is to be launched in early 2017 for consultation. I'm moving into the correspondence section now. Sandra?
I really can't believe that they're trying to say this is good news, because I was told before that this e-safety strategy would be consulted upon in May this year. So I just find that shocking and think that should be noted.
Okay.
Okay.
Moving into correspondence, and this is where I'll give way to Peter for some time.
So, Chairperson, at page 183 to 184, there's just a summary note, and if members are content to dispose of the correspondence in those terms, there's just a couple of really quick ones. Page 185, Chair and Deputy Chair are invited to an Education in Northern Ireland Improving Attainment and Reducing Inequalities conference. They're asked to actually chair the seminar, so if members are content for them to do that.
I think it should go, yeah.
Diary permitting. Then at page 197...
And you can plan some mischievous business in the chamber when Chris isn't about,
The approved, page 197, the approved home childcare scheme. So this is a question on the employers for childcare scheme. What the department's indicating is that it's for the Department of Health to bring forward the legislation. We've written to the Department of Health as well. So this is a scheme which had VAT applied to it somewhat unexpectedly, and thus has had to wind up. But the education has just come back on this issue, and we're just waiting for our health response, if members are happy to do that. And then at page 2...
Chair, I think that's a disappointing response. It's effectively saying that the Department of Education decided not to help fund the gap between now and the Department of Health being able to bring forward that legislation. I think that's disappointing, and it's a missed opportunity. That scheme is now closed unless and until funding becomes available to do so, with the associated redundancies, loss of staff and loss of provision for families. It's a shame the Department of Education didn't think there was any way to help with that funding gap, given its responsibility for childcare provision.
Okay. Any action point there?
I don't think so. I think that's their letter saying we're not funding this.
Okay. Moving on.
To page 210, rationalisation of outdoor education centres. The committee had asked a question about there's a number of different measures that were used. How were these different measures were ranked, and then they were weighted. The answer from the Education Authority doesn't really answer that, but in written answers this week, it actually seems to indicate that each ranking was marked out of 8, and they were weighted equally, is my reading of written answers, so for members' information. The committee wrote last week seeking further information on the condition survey, and will be meeting informally with Sports Forum and possibly NASUWT on this issue this day next week. And the committee will hear again from the Education Authority on the feedback to the consultation in the new year.
What date does the consultation close?
I think it's the 6th of February, am I right?
February, okay.
Chair, is there any way of us challenging any of that? Because, I mean, some of the variables are quite significantly different in terms of what they would cause an impact. I mean, for example, one of the variables which was considered was the proximity to the next centre. And that seems really cruel that somewhere's going to be closed down on an equal basis because a voluntary centre is located 1 mile down the road to one centre, but it may be 3 miles down the road to another. It seems a very crude way. Likewise, the aspirations on the work that needs to be done to build, it just, to weight them equally just seems very lazy, if to use a term.
Chair, it's for the committee to make up its mind, and if they feel that the consultation is flawed, or they feel the consultation is good, or they feel that the ranking system is inappropriate, it's for the committee to say that. And the suggestion is that the Education Authority will come back when the consultation is finished. They'll give a summary of what everybody said, and then they'll ask the committee what they think. And I have explained it to them is that how this is supposed to work is no decision taken till committee, acting as the super consultee, gives its view, and then we go. So at that point, the committee can say it now, but can make it abundantly clear then whether it approves or disapproves of how this proposal has been taken forward.
Take we didn't get the condition survey report yet. No,
we've only just written for that, but they've come back to me asking for clarification actually, but which I've provided. So if members are happy, page 215, Aspire, Achieve, Succeed event. This is an invitation to the Chair from the Fostering Network to an event on Monday 16th of January, 10:30 Long Gallery. If members are content for the Chair to attend, diary permitting.
Agreed.
Afternoon this year, morning. On page 216, from a concerned parent about capacity provision for ASD children in Tyrone. So it's just suggested that the committee writes to the Education Authority just seeking clarity on autism provision by area.
Okay, that's agreed, members. Intent to inquire accordingly. Moving into the forward work programme. I want to refer members now to the forward work programme at page 218. On Wednesday of next week, the committee will receive a briefing on nurture from Queen's University and will consider our response on the PFG. The committee will also hopefully receive informal briefings on the outdoor education centres from the Sports Forum and the Teachers' Council on issues in education. So I'm asking members to approve the forward work programme as amended.
Chair, I note there it talks about an informal meeting with teacher unions on issues in education at 1 p.m. You and I spoke yesterday of another meeting that was due to start at 12:30.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, is there any way those meetings could be pushed forward?
Or was that pushed into the afternoon, that procedures meeting?
but we should get it done.
It was 12. You're the same.
I am,
Chris.
and Colin is too.
Sorry,
I
Colin.
thought I was getting out of it, but I'm not.
It's 12:30.
So
there is
there's four.
To be clear, there's a procedures committee meeting on scheduled for 12:30 on Wednesday, the 14th of
That's
December,
where I'm speaking.
which would include Chair,
That's right.
me,
That's right.
Rosemary, and Colin.
Collins.
4 members.
Members
We'll have to adjust one of those meetings.
Yep.
If I spoke nicely to Ciara for say would a later time like 2 o'clock suit members?
Yeah.
So bring the Sports Forum.
No, we'll keep us the same, and I'll just mess about with the other committee if members are agreeable, since we nearly have a quorum here.
Okay,
the other committee.
okay.
So we agree that we just make our day longer by having one.
Yes.
Well, we agree that we tell the procedures committee the chance they're meeting to do.
I'll speak nicely to Ciara and see if she'll do that.
Chair.
All right.
Right.
You're fine.
Just to confirm, Wednesday, the first meeting will still take place at 12?
Around about that time, yes.
There's nothing prior to that?
Well, there's our normal committee meeting at 10, so we've our nurture provision, which that will take about an hour, and then we'll have to agree the programme for government response. I'm not sure how controversial, how long that will take, so that would probably take us to about 10:30, so allowing for some delay. Then 12 o'clock, Sports Forum, 1 hour with them, and then a working lunch at 1 p.m. with the teaching unions till 2, and then you could go on to your procedures meeting.
I love recess.
Okay. That's right.
I'd arranged a meeting for next Wednesday, but I will rearrange.
Well, you just have to change it, won't you?
Yeah, I didn't. A different meeting.
Okay. Moving now to any other business, because that's agreed. The forward work programme as amended has been agreed. Any other business? I want to ask members if you have any other items of business, and anticipating that you don't. Sandra, how you keeping? I can just sense that. an AOB item there.
Everything.
The next meeting will take place on Wednesday, the 14th of December at 10 o'clock in room 30, and the committee does now adjourn. Okay,
So members,
adjourn.
lunch is served out